Hey everybody, this is Linda Misegadis, and you're listening to An Unconventional Guide to Success, the show that talks about real life with real people for those of you who are interested in learning from others the steps they took on their journey towards success as defined by them. We have an exciting lineup of guests for Season 3 and hope you enjoy. Hey everyone, welcome to the studio. It's so great to see you, Scott.
Good to see you too, Linda. Thank you.
Yes.
We've got a great guest today,
We
Gretchen.
do.
Yeah.
We have a wonderful guest in the here with us today. I'm sure the audience is really going to love hearing from Gretchen today. And with that, let me jump in and introduce Gretchen. Gretchen is actually a leadership and development consultant and executive coach. She has more than 30 years experience in the fields of education, behavioral science, leadership development, and business management. As an organizational development consultant, she works with corporations, not-for-profits, governmental and educational organizations to create learning environments, designing and delivering for leadership and team development, and facilitation for strategic visioning, board, and executive retreats and leadership coaching. So she's not very busy at all, you can tell.
No.
No, not at all. She's an experienced professional facilitator and understands the challenges inherent in strategic discussions. And boy, is that going on a lot today. This involves understanding personal values and goals, attachments to deeply held beliefs and differing perspectives, which is so important as we dig in on unconscious bias these days. So as an executive coach, she's a catalyst for positive, proactive change and action-oriented individuals who want to do better and be their best. And she forms long-term collaborative partnerships with her clients, hence why we're here today. So I love that
That's
last
right.
statement. Absolutely. Well, welcome to the studio, Gretchen.
Linda, thank you so much. Who is that person? I just don't know who she is.
I know, isn't it kind of fun
I do,
sometimes to
I
hear
do.
your bio? You're like, wow, I'm pretty impressive. You have no idea sometimes. It's like when you look back, you don't self-reflect enough sometimes on the amazing accomplishments you have in your life, I think. So.
And it's really interesting to have someone read them to you.
Yes, right?
You know?
Yeah.
I think I like that reflective piece. Thank you for that.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I feel like I've been bathed in this. Oh, yeah. Oh, yes.
Well, it becomes a second nature, right? It almost becomes just inherent to who you are. And so you kind of forget like all of these things and you kind of look back a little bit and you're like, wow, I have accomplished a lot. And you've got many more things to accomplish. So that's even better.
Well, it's interesting because I live in the Pacific Northwest, and having been DC based and West Coast based, in DC, when people ask you, what do you do? It's that.
Yeah.
And out here, when people ask you, what do you do? It's like, I kayak, I hike.
Isn't that wonderful?
You know,
Yeah.
so different cultures, different frameworks.
Definitely. No, it's so true. That's such a good perspective on that for sure. Because East Coast versus West Coast. Yeah.
Well, and to just chime in on that, Gretchen, all the things you've accomplished and that we've shared in your bio here that Linda read about, I've personally experienced as my leadership coach. And one of the first lessons I had learned is this tri-state area that we live in of, how do you define yourself, right? It's all about my career and it's all about my importance and my self-worth and all the things I've achieved. And when she enlightened me on the notion that if you can get yourself out of that. And so I bought a place at the beach. We talk about that in chapter 4. Getting across the Chesapeake Bay Bridge now is something I always remember Gretchen in because it's when your shoulders start to drop.
Yeah.
And Beach Scott becomes something other than accomplished Scott.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
It's a really nice transition. So, there's just one of the many influences we're going to talk about today that Gretchen can provide and does provide and has provided for me. So it's really good awareness.
No, that's good. It's always nice to have old friends and colleagues on with us. So let's jump right in. I always like to start with an icebreaker, Gretchen, despite what Scott thinks. Icebreakers are a good way to start podcasts. So it's just for a little fun. So if you could hang out with any cartoon character, who would that cartoon character be and why?
I love that question. Actually, when I think about a cartoon character, it's actually somebody that I would say has given me a lot of guidance in my life, um, because of who she is and who she became. And that is Princess Fiona in Shrek.
Interesting.
Because the princess side of that
Yeah.
piece of having to wear the crown and have the look and to manage the image and all that goes with that, and then being able to evolve and to liberate into finding her voice and the love of good things, but still holding that space where she knows who she
Yeah.
is, and she's able to become who she's become. So that's been the journey,
I like
and
that.
so that's why she'd be my girl I'd like to have lunch with.
I like that
Love it.
one. Yo, that's a good one. Scott, are you sticking with your
I'm sticking.
Yeah, so tell everybody who it is.
I'm sticking with the Incredible Hulk.
Yeah.
I come in hot. I change with the tides too fast. Always
And
for
you're
the
green.
and I'm always for the greater good. Always for the greater good is the intention. But yeah,
No, I love it.
everything's nice and scientific until it isn't, and that happens on a dime. So
Yeah.
it's all,
Yeah. No, I think that's
yeah.
great. That's a good one.
And what's yours, Linda? Again,
Let's see, who do
are you
I
sticking
want
with
to
it?
hang out with today? So last time I talked about Deadpool because Deadpool has 0 filters, and sometimes I would like to just take all the filters off and just
Right.
be whoever comes out. So, but let's see. I'm a huge Looney Tunes fan, and so I'd kind of like to hang out with Bugs Bunny and understand a little bit more of what makes that guy tick. I've always been a huge fan of Daffy Duck because I could kind of relate with his craziness. But there's something very methodical about how Bugs Bunny interacts with people and just his thought process and what he does. And there's a little tiny manipulativeness about Bugs Bunny that I
Okay.
find quite
All right, we're gonna go there then.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So
And all of these characters show up at every team meeting we're
yes,
in.
they
Yep,
do.
they
Oh my
do.
Right?
goodness, so true. It is so true. Yeah, no,
They totally do.
yeah, it is.
Kind of dials it way down when you look across the table at the senior vice president and just think,
Yeah.
Bugs
No,
Bunny.
exactly. Well, and that's what I love because that old thing where they tell you to picture everyone in the room in their underwear or something like that. I'd much rather picture who I think they are as a cartoon character because it's just way
There you
more
go.
I would
way more
really like that
entertaining.
if people would do that when they see me at the head of the table and just take off the Hulk
Yeah,
and just
yeah.
call me Incredible.
Yeah, right, there you go, right? There he is, Mr. Incredible.
There it is.
Mr. Incredible.
I love
I don't know,
it.
just an idea.
Oh, that's good. So, Gretchen, did you always want to be an executive leadership coach? Like, did you wake up as a little girl and say, I know what I want to do? I'm going to be an executive leadership coach.
It's an interesting aspect because coaching, I would say, is a tool that's it's an arrow in my
Yeah.
quiver. It's part of what I bring. But I was a teacher in my first life.
Okay.
Finished college and was a reading specialist.
Oh,
And I was the kind of teacher who was a coach.
okay.
So really unpacked, learning in that way,
Yeah.
and came from, 30 years ago, before people were talking about mindset, we were working with
Wow.
that, well, what did you want to have happen? How did that work? Wow, that's hard, isn't it? Let's try that one
Mhm.
again. So, let's practice that. And over the years, I got my master's in organizational development in my mid 40s. And I was working with senior leaders and their teams, and I was facilitating and doing some training. And I would also show up and we would coach through those challenging conversations. And this was when coaching was really beginning to have a visible presence, and the ICF was being founded, and they were wanting to certify coaches. So I really came into it as a process consultant and a facilitator, and then coaching really became an aspect of the offering.
Oh, I like
So,
that. When I liked something that you said there, because we've talked about this a little bit, is that these concepts are not new. Like even Carol Dweck's book on mindset is not a new book. All of the things
mhm,
that we're seeing today that are kind of being brought forward aren't new ideas, aren't new concepts, and I said many of these books were written a long time ago. It's just we weren't ready for that. So we weren't ready
mhm.
as a person, as organizations to really kind of embrace this notion that perhaps, we do need a little bit of leadership coaching. Perhaps we do need to really kind of look at our mindset because we don't always think of it in that context. We make broad-based assumptions that people are in the roles that they're in because they're just the smartest person in the world. And so that's why we put them in that leadership role. That's not always the case, and many times isn't the case. They've not necessarily been given that coaching and guidance throughout their careers. So it's kind of interesting, that it's evolved to where it is today.
I would say too, as a coach, I really draw on that experience on human development that I got actually as a trained teacher
Yeah.
to think about how much our early childhood impacts us, and our first team is our family.
Yeah.
So when a leader becomes,
Hmm.
self-aware of how they show up, and when they're in their, A game,
Yeah.
they may show up as a fully formed
Yeah.
adult. And when they're a little bit off or under stress or duress, they're probably that 12-year-old at the dinner table who's not happy with mom and dad and,
Yeah.
fighting with their sibling. So when teams start to think about, who's in the
Hmm.
room with me today and how am I showing up,
Yeah.
it's the whole person.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and there's different aspects of it,
Yep.
and as Gretchen coached me and through that process for the last 15 years in my business, one of the earlier books you suggested I read is called Growing Up Again. I forget the author.
Oh, yeah, yeah, Jean Isley Clark,
G-
Growing Up Again, Parenting Ourselves,
Oh,
and become
Parenting Our
yeah.
Children. I mean, I've been really candid. The relationship that you build with a client is based on
Right.
trust, and you really are fully present to
Hmm.
them. And over the years, Scott and I have had the great good fortune of working together. I hold myself more as a strategic
Yeah.
advisor, so it's kind of like that full
Yeah.
offering. Um, but we've also gone through life experiences together. And so, when his brother Dan passed, I had a shared experience with my brother Stephen
Mm,
passing when he was 32.
yeah.
So, that experience of having that kind of
Yep.
loss and being able to be present to someone, just present to
Yeah.
them
Yep.
in that,
Yeah.
it's a piece of that. So
No, that makes a lot of
we
sense.
bring
We
ourselves.
do.
And
Yeah.
I think that that's what people are wanting, is to belong to something, have work that's
Yeah.
meaningful, to feel that they have a place where they belong, and to be able to contribute. So I'm a big fan of kindness. It's
Yeah.
amazing what kindness can do and how it can be an
Oh, I
invitation.
totally agree. It doesn't take any effort to be kind to people, and I do think that you see that often that kindness is one of those things that we forget about, and it's such a simple thing to do. Is to just be nice.
and I
It's not hard.
and I really like how Gretchen emphasizes, in the previous podcast we talked about how coaching is maybe an arrow in her quiver.
Yeah. Hmm.
It is really true in our dance. And, one of the things that's interesting, and I know the title of our podcast, The Unconventional Guide,
Hmm.
the title of the book, Unconventional Guide to Success, How Did You Get Here?
Yeah.
Just to tell the story another layer with Gretchen, that's from my lens as her strategic advisor, or as she's a coach. I remember I had met Gretchen in when I was doing real estate. And when I put the listing up, I got to know Gretchen and her husband, Paul, a little bit
Sure.
in a way that was just sort of starting to befriend Gretchen and Paul as well,
Yeah.
not just in the transaction. And I remember when I decided to go full on with WorldGate as a consulting firm,
Hmm.
I reached out to Gretchen and Paul and said, "Hey, I need, a little bit of advice. You guys have these resumes that are a little bit deeper. I'd
Yeah.
like to, and Gretchen applied coaching to our interaction, but I'd like some strategic advice. We did some SWOT analysis. We
Yeah.
did all these things together. And what's important about Gretchen and what we're unpacking here about why she's even here today is she's basically every chapter of the book also,
Yeah.
in that she partners, she's in relationship, she's teaching of good habits and supportive of that,
Hmm.
she's coaching, and she helps set goals that were realistic. And it runs the gamut to the last chapter, which is really WorldGate culture and what WorldGate's all about and
Hmm.
behaviors. And so what I'm sharing and highlighting here is for our viewers and these young listeners to realize is that one person is not just a coach and one person is
Yeah.
not just necessarily a strategic advisor, but that you can run the gamut in relationship.
Yeah.
And I think even with our brother's passing, it's really important to recognize that she was bringing maybe her coaching hat or maybe her friend ear
Yeah.
or maybe her experience in how to navigate some of the stuff.
Yeah.
And that's
Absolutely.
a really important thing that I think really puts an exclamation point on why I even wrote the book is it really matters for this next generation to realize you're not just going to come out of school and start a business and be great.
Right.
You've got to reach out to people, forge relationships, and you can get pieces of those people
Yeah.
and apply them and give pieces back.
Yeah.
I know Gretchen was having, some issues in her life, and she said, "Hey, I need you to bring your coaching hat."
Yeah.
As a certified leadership coach, I did to the conversation. But what was ironic about it is she was the reason I was a certified
Right.
coach
Yeah.
to begin
Yeah.
with.
Yeah. Well, that's the beauty of relationships. Yeah.
Well, I think, and I mean that chapter's entitled "Teacher," mentor,
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
coach, and being a mentor and having a mentor for the audience that I think your book is really focused to support. Having a mentor when you're in your early
Hmm.
career, having several mentors, different areas in your
Yeah.
Right.
life, but as a mentee, you bring something to the mentor as
Yeah.
well. They learn from you, but having a mentor gives you someone that you can bounce your ideas
Hmm.
off of. You can listen to their guidance and their wisdom because they've got a little bit of
Yeah.
track down, and oftentimes they understand the political and the organizational
Hmm.
dynamics if you're in a business
Yeah.
setting. um, it's we have to have a more fluid
Yeah.
intergenerational
Yeah.
Yeah.
relationship. So mentoring, and right now I'm an executive coach with Chief,
Okay.
which
Yeah.
is about women in
Yeah. Yeah.
leadership and really changing the face of leadership. You know, mentoring has been key, and networking is key to
Yeah.
women being able to progress into the C
Hmm.
suite, to manage their careers, and organizations that support networking,
Yeah.
that encourage their young leaders and, especially women, to bring them to that visible
Yeah.
place to succeed in the organization comes from supporting
Yep.
mentoring and
That's
networking.
very
It's
true.
so it's
Couldn't
so
couldn't
critical
agree
that
more.
we hear that. And it's really what I really liked about when we asked you about coaching and did you always want to be a coach? Your response was, I see myself more as a strategic advisor,
Hmm.
because that does create a little bit of fluidity in
Hmm.
what hat do you need to wear in what day.
Yep.
And I will say that what that moves me to in our conversation is to recognize that Gretchen and I have been coach, coachee, mentor, mentee, she for me, even when it comes down to supporting some of the ways in which I described things in the book, she had editing rights to, which was great.
Yeah.
But we meet every week or every 2 weeks
Yeah.
for the last 15
Yep.
years
When I
for
think
an hour.
that's a big piece of it, right? Is that it's you as just kind of thinking about the advice that you were giving there, Gretchen, is that young people need to seek out those mentors though, because like I think about myself as a young person, I don't really look back and go, wow, I had some amazing mentors in my life. But I also did not seek out those mentors either because I
Mhm.
was, maybe I was insecure, maybe whatever it was, but I didn't feel like now there were some people that definitely helped me along the way throughout my career and gave me some great advice. But I don't look back and go, wow, I had these amazing mentors and they're the ones who helped me. But there's a responsibility on that for me, right? In that it's okay to go and seek those people out. And I think
Yeah.
that's some of the best advice we can give to younger generations is that go and ask the questions, ask for help. And then for
100%.
the older generation, one of my favorite people is Kristen Scroggins, and she does all of this work on, she's a company called Gen Y, and she was a professor at the University of Alabama, but what she teaches is on multi-generational communication and how we interact with one another. And what she was talking about is that, the older generation, like as I was growing up too, it was very much like, we'll call it hazing a little bit. It's like we had to learn those lessons because that's what they went through this and they went through that, pull up your bootstraps, and that instead of just saying, hey, you know what, this was my experience and this is how I handled it and this is how I would advise that maybe you take a look at that situation. We could be much better leaders and guiders to the younger generation. And when they come and ask for that help, let's offer up the help, not let's give them a life lesson on, pulling up your
Yeah, right.
bootstraps. So
Back to kindness. Back to
back
kindness.
to kindness.
Right.
Yes, exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I know that that's a big part of what Scott likes about, connecting with folks from all
Yeah.
generations, usually over, run or the
Yeah.
gym, but in service to having those connections. It's a big piece of it. I think some of the best conversations I've ever had with some of the youngers, and man, Scott has sat at my table here on Orcas Island, so he knows the place I'm from which I
Yeah.
speak.
Yeah.
But it's over a cup of tea or having a glass of
Yeah.
wine and just having a conversation and listening to their hopes and their dreams and not telling them what they should do with it, but just
Exactly. Just
listen.
listen. Yeah. No, I love that.
So
One of
huge.
the kids I work with here at UKG, I was on a call with him yesterday, and all of a sudden he's like, Linda, he's like, I just can totally be myself with you. He's like, I know I'm totally rambling and everything. He's like, but you listen to what I say. And I didn't really put too much to that until what you just said there, Gretchen, is that, it really is like, he is just rambling with all these great, but I just want to let him have that freedom to do that, because in all of that rambling, he was learning something through the process. And he was, I was just kind of listening to him, and every once in a while I'd insert a little something, but just letting him talk without any parameters. And just watching him blossom has been so much fun to see that. And you're right. That's what I hear it from my own son. It's like, sometimes it's like, I don't need your advice. I just need your ear, right? I just need you to hear what
Yeah.
I'm saying. And we forget that sometimes.
Well,
So
and both of you are that for me, and Gretchen has been a long time person, but Linda, just before this call, I was dumping email after email on you because I learned early on, and this is to your point, I learned early on that talking about it for me
yeah,
helps me find the solution.
yeah,
It's not an ask of you to be anything other than holding that space,
yeah.
both of you.
No.
And
Extroverted thinker that you
Yeah,
are.
right. And
Scott
exactly.
talks to think,
Yes.
right?
right.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm an extrovert as well. It's just like, don't fix it. I just have to talk
Yeah.
about it.
No, that's
Yeah.
good. When I'm the
Really
exact
important.
opposite, I'm an introvert. I compartmentalize and internalize, and that's how I process everything, which may be why I can be the balance sometimes too. Scott's extrovert is my introvert, and somewhere in between that, we find the balance.
I call it ballast and sail,
Oh,
Linda.
yeah.
I mean, Scott's got that wind and the sail,
Yeah.
but without the ballast that creates the
Yeah.
stability.
I love that.
So you guys are a good team because you bring, that
Yeah.
contrast.
Well, that's the
And
thing. I think we're all three a good team, and it's interesting we bring our unique gifts to that. And
yeah,
Gretchen, I love the eloquence you bring to the analogies, ballast sail, kite string, all the stuff, right?
Yeah.
Because it's really important for people to hear that. Even as an introvert, you need that ballast,
hmm
and
hmm
as an extrovert, I might need the string or that kite. Is ballast the thing that grounds you in sailing, or
the ballast is the keel. It's what gives the boat the
so? Yeah,
stability and holds it upright.
the sail
But
is what I
without
bring.
having the sail, you're not going to go too far.
Yeah.
Right.
And without having the ballast, you're not going to stay
Yeah.
upright.
And so
So
introverts should hear that being an introvert is the ballast,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
you're not going to go too far without a sail any further than the sail's going to go without a
Yeah.
ballast.
No,
And
it's really good.
these conversations are really valuable if people can pull
Yeah.
out the
I
nuggets.
agree.
One final thing to your point about the gym is, one of the guys at the gym that I work out with, and he's in his mid-30s, he's still pushing his career around, trying to figure out what he wants to do in his life, literally took me out to lunch yesterday and literally brought a list of questions. And it was
Mhm.
so fulfilling and so why I'm doing all this to
Yeah.
hear him say, should I be putting more money in my 401k or buying real estate? And you're going, well, let's talk about what your life's mission is. And there
Yeah.
are many components. Is your girlfriend going to become your wife? Are you going to have kids? Do you want to live in this area? All these
Right.
things that
Right.
people just need that
Yep.
ballast to try and figure out what to do with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I
Right.
like
So to
that.
Linda's point, and to
Yeah.
Linda's point, and to one of the subchapters in the chapter, networking and asking for it is essential.
Yeah.
And so however you need to do that, I think what we're talking about here is really important.
Yeah.
And
And
again,
how, as we as elders, and anybody who's over the age of
Yeah.
40
right.
kind of is moving into that eldering
Yeah.
role, how can we become the invitation?
Exactly.
How can we be approachable? I mean, Linda, obviously, you've got a dynamic with this young man, and he feels comfortable
Right.
to maybe close the door and talk with you about things. And I think the gift of introversion, well, it's nice that we're actually recognizing how potent introverts
Yeah.
are. I
Yeah.
mean, for a long time, high reward for extroverted
Absolutely.
leaders. What's a leader? Executive presence. How am I out there? How do I
Yeah.
speak? But introverts take the time to think about what they want to
Yeah.
say. What happens is, if they don't have the space when they're ready to share, then we don't get their best
No.
thinking. Or if we don't, prime the pump that we're going to have a conversation about
Yeah.
this. So introverts can come preloaded to contribute
Yeah.
or follow up after the
Yeah.
meeting with an introvert to say, okay, you didn't hear too much from you then, but I'm sure you've had a chance to think about
Yeah.
it. Tell me what your thoughts are.
Absolutely.
So honoring our differences and realizing that, how we process information
Yes.
and how we contribute it, so
So I
important as a
totally
leader
It's
to
so
agree.
create
important.
space.
And to the end of the fact that you guys have supported me, I in turn have supported, for example, Linda's assessments and some of the
Yeah.
coaching we've done, giving the space to her to
Mhm.
communicate from an extroverted perspective. And we've fallen off. I'm just realizing we've fallen off that. We might want to get back into
Yeah.
that because there's some things I'm curious how they resolved.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
but it's really important for people to see the yin and yang and the give and take and the different roles that we hold amongst each other.
Yeah.
And that foundation of trust and comfort is earned over time,
I
right?
totally agree.
And
Yeah.
Yeah.
these are just valid things. Yeah, sorry, Linda, go ahead.
No, you're
Yeah.
good. I know those are really good points. Well, I was just going to ask Gretchen, one of the things you describe yourself as a weaver, a leader, and a catalyst for change. Tell us what does that mean to you? I'm really curious about the weaver part for sure. So
This Scott laughs, and it's true. So I when I lived in the DC
yeah,
metro area, first marriage, lawyer, building a law firm. I was in real estate, had 3 kids before I was 28. Really, really busy, busy,
yeah,
busy. Because I was selling land in Montgomery County, I knew what was coming along the 270 corridor, and living in Montgomery County felt a little bit
mm,
cramped seeing what was on the drawing
yeah,
board. So my first husband Jim and I started to look for other places to raise our kids, because our kids are, they're great learners, but they learn differently. And to be in a large school, or to have to, carry the responsibility of, 3 private school tuitions, it's like, well, maybe there's another
yeah,
way. So I started looking at small town America. And I mean, we're talking in like the, 1986,
okay,
1987. And so fast forward, we ended up moving to an island that's ferry served in the Pacific Northwest. But stayed engaged with his law practice.
Okay.
And I continue to go back to the DC area every 6 weeks to be a drug and alcohol prevention
Wow.
trainer. And I got involved with that through Montgomery County because they were the first county to receive a lot of money for task
Okay.
forces for prevention. I had the marvelous experience of being trained by a woman named Rita Rumbaugh. Isn't
That
that
is
a
a
great
great name.
name?
Yeah, I love that.
Rita was one of my early teachers. And what she did is there would be parents and there would be students and there would be teachers, and we'd come together, and she would facilitate our being able to work
Okay.
together. So then we went back into our communities
Awesome.
and offered training and support, and connected. Especially, I was, hosting conversations with parents whose kids were in high
Yeah.
school just before they were getting their driver's
Okay.
license. Let's talk about
Yeah.
prom. What about beach week? How do you feel about your kid?
Yeah.
All of those things. And so, because I lived in that and was a bit removed from
Mhm.
it, you know, coming to a small community,
Yeah.
I found that being the host, to being the invitation, putting on the kettle, inviting people to come over, I met people who had something and I met people who needed something, and I could kind of weave them together.
I
Yeah.
love that.
So in my, 32 years living on this island
Yeah.
of, I think there's like 5,000
Wow.
people year round. That's been, so my daughter, who's 44, came back to live in the islands at COVID time, and she said, "Mom, you know everybody." And it's like, well, I've been around here for a
Right,
while,
It's
right.
but I
only so
know that,
big.
this person, it paints, and this person needs a painter, and this
Yeah.
person,
I love
and
that.
it's like, here's this. So that's kind of my weaving story, but it
Yeah.
came from learning how to be a community weaver. And, people just want the
I love that.
invitation and oftentimes are
Yeah,
shy.
they are.
Yeah.
No, I think that's really, that is so cool. I love that, that kind of take that approach and then bringing people together like that is awesome. Well, and I'm curious because coaching can sometimes feel a little bit like counseling, and I always think, gosh, how hard would it be to sit around and listen to people's problems all day long? So how do you incorporate self-care into your life?
I
I like
am
that laugh, by the way. This is a
Sounded diabolic,
G-rated.
yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
I do live in Washington State.
Yeah.
I'll just say
Yes,
that.
yes. Fair enough. I'm in Colorado, so I know.
I live right. Yes, yes, I know that.
Yes.
Yes, I live in I call it the Shire.
Okay.
My
Yeah.
husband Paul and I live in this grove of cedar trees. And I am really blessed to have made that
Yeah.
shift where nature is very available to me. I was almost going to be in a 2-bedroom high-rise apartment in
Mm.
Reston when COVID decided it was going to send us all to our
Yes.
rooms,
Yeah.
and got out of that situation, came back to the island, and have been pretty much, working from a remote place all over the globe. I'm fortunate with that. So nature is really my guide. It restorative. And, one of the benefits for me as a coach is it's it's not my problem.
Yeah, that's
It's
good.
not my
Yeah.
challenge, it's the client's
Yeah.
challenge. And so how can I be present to help them unpack it? There's empathy and there's
Yeah.
compassion, but there's not collapsing,
Yeah.
and I think having, I grew up in a family where I had to do my work to learn how to have good
Mhm.
boundaries.
Yeah.
I don't know many of my friends who haven't had that same
Right.
experience. So it gives us that
Yeah.
chance growing up again, parenting
Yeah.
myself.
No.
So knowing where I end and somebody else begins, that's a piece of it as
I
well.
like that. I was telling Scott one of the best pieces of advice I got from one of my coaches was, "It's not about you," and that
Yeah.
was, and she said, "And stop using I statements, Linda." And that was some of the best advice I had received because I think it's probably my introverted nature. I internalize everybody's stuff, so I'm carrying it around with me and it's heavy and my shoulders are weighted down because I'm now making it about me and about how it's affecting me. And when I started to
Mm-hmm.
stop looking at it through that lens and go, it's not about you, Linda. It's about this person, the challenge they're facing, and how can you provide some guidance around that and then let it go because it's not your burden to carry with you either. Were some
Mm-hmm.
really key things that I learned. And that's what I just heard a lot of what you were saying there is that you can't make it about you. You're there to guide and provide direction, but at the end of the day, it's that person needs to then take that and either do with it, something positive or not do anything at all. So
Well, because the only person I can change is
yeah,
myself.
Right.
yeah,
And try as I might, want to change my partner, my children, my
yeah,
friends, the world, I
yep,
can't.
yeah,
So getting a reset on that one. And Scott will laugh because, here I sit. I'm a big believer in water.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And I really think it's such a key aspect to us because we are primarily
yeah,
water. And as a fluid person, I mean, I'm a Pisces, I am a water
yeah,
sign. And so, those of us who have that compassionate care and that edge, we have to really keep our hydration
yes.
and that fluidity. And if we don't, then we become stagnant and that pond is not pretty.
No, that is
I
so
want to go back
true.
real quick just to
Mhm.
I want to go back real quick to something you guys were talking about, Linda, with your how do you not take on and collapse, as Gretchen called it, into the problems of the
Yeah,
person you're
yeah,
holding space for, and how it's not about us as the
right,
person holding the space,
right.
right? The other thing that I wanted to just dabble into a little bit that came up for me in that conversation is the word loyalty.
Mm-hmm,
And so
mm-hmm.
for me, I trust, for example, in our relationship, this you three, us three,
Yeah,
I will
Mhm.
always be there for Gretchen
yep,
as long as she wants me there.
yeah,
And I will always be there for Linda as long as she wants me
right,
there. And
right.
that's a loyalty that assures I likely won't collapse if I just say, here's my boundary.
Yes, yeah,
I'm
Mhm.
not going further, but I'm also not going away.
right.
So
Right.
that balance of holding that space and being present for me is complemented with people I choose to be loyal to.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
And it does
Mhm.
solidify a more transparent, more open dialogue. I mean, I literally can be myself in front of both of you,
yeah,
and I'm actually getting better of saying, I can, I'm dumping right now or I'm venting because I
yeah,
know it's a safe space. And holding that back for you
yeah.
is also the same case. There's no offense in what you have to say to me
Right, right,
Right.
yeah.
because of the loyalty quadrant of
Yep,
that space I'm holding for
yeah,
this relationship. Does that make
I
sense?
agree.
What
It does.
and one of the things that I've noticed too over the years, and the two of you, I think, share this as well, is that we meet people perhaps through our work, or we meet people perhaps through our children, or we meet people and then we get to know them differently. So we're
Yeah,
multifaceted.
Mhm.
yeah,
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
So having an awareness of our boundaries around, this, I have to do this in my work role, and we have this relationship, and
yeah,
there's that.
yeah.
But we can also give each other feedback
Mhm.
because you're a trusted friend,
Right.
and I can
Yes.
hear things from you
Yeah.
because you're offering them, because you're not like hit and run. You're
Right.
not
Yes.
going to just dump
Yeah,
it and leave. I might not like what I'm hearing. I
right.
might need to say, tell me a little bit about that, or I think I need a moment or a
Yeah,
break,
yeah,
and we can do that, but we keep showing up in each other's lives.
yeah,
Yeah. And
exactly.
that somatic
Yeah,
response to who you're going to show up with is something we talk about in the book. And that loyalty
Hmm.
and what you're
mhm.
touching on, Gretchen, was expressed well in the book, in that, it's multifaceted and it's loyal and I think it's really important to touch on that for our viewers and listeners to recognize. I like multifaceted as a way to summarize what I'm trying to
Yeah.
say. And those
Mm-hmm.
facets include skill and quivers,
Yeah.
and I'm sorry,
Mhm.
arrows, and they also include loyalty and emotional. And the big thing is self-awareness,
Mm-hmm.
right? If
Mhm.
we're constantly working on the
Yeah.
self-awareness, it's
Yeah.
not an I me statement. It's a how am I working at peak performance for those I'm loyal to statement, is the way I view that.
Well, and how
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
how do I show up? There's a feedback loop there.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like,
Yes.
well, let me
Yeah.
tell you what
Yeah.
I saw.
Right.
Or, like
Yes.
your story, Linda, earlier about listening to, your younger associate just being able to go, "Bleh," and here's
Yeah.
my thinking, it's on the wall. So all right, so then what do you want to do with that?
Right.
Because
Yes.
you can't go to that meeting and do that.
Right.
Exactly.
So
Yes.
let me give you a
Yeah.
little feedback. I heard it all, but what
Yeah.
parts of that do
Yeah.
you really want to
Linda
convey?
did that to me
And
Absolutely.
literally 45 minutes ago. Linda said, "Don't send that message. Send this message."
it's like, and being able to give that feedback
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
is an important part of it as well.
I think so.
But I think, Scott, your book is it's a collection of your stories.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when I read your manuscript and had heard your stories,
Yeah. Lived
having
them. You
been
lived
on
them.
the journey with you,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's like, if we can listen to each other's
Yeah.
stories,
Yeah.
we hear people's
Yeah.
lives. So for me, as a coach, that is probably the greatest honor, is to be able to be present to somebody and hear their stories. And I've been at this for 25 to 30 years.
Yeah.
It's like, so I hear that story. So is that story serving you?
Right.
How does that story work
Yeah.
now? Because you've been dragging that suitcase for a long time.
Yeah.
That's the
So is there anything
continuity.
you'd like to take out of it,
Yeah.
lighten the load?
Yeah.
Well,
No,
that's
it's
the continuity piece that I was saying earlier about we've met every week for 15 years.
yeah.
Because when you lose that continuity, you lose understanding what's in the suitcase, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
And
it.
the
Yeah.
evolution doesn't change. And it's so
Oh gosh, most of us don't even want to look in the garage
Right.
or in the attic or in the basement, let alone,
Yes.
unpack the trunk.
No, it's
But
very true.
that's part of the gift of, having somebody who really listens to
well,
you.
and I
I
hope to see
totally
people are
agree.
really listening to this conversation because, again, we're hitting on all cylinders for me, just
Yeah.
in really trying to unpack at a high level. Because when you were talking about the book and how it's my
Yep.
stories relate to the arrows of the quiver known as the book, is the
Mm-hmm.
way I look at it.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
just taking it to the whole length of this conversation, each chapter is its own quiver: self-care, communications, relationships, all that. You add your stories to this book that could be considered a quiver in skills that we've taught, that Gretchen, you've even exposed to me to go consider pursuing through the coaching certification process,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
bringing those to business is the new thing from the
Right.
90s,
Right.
because these were all done in athletic coaching earlier. So the
right.
product from tennis to coaching is something else that I was coming up for me earlier. That's just the phenomenon. It's not that
Mm-hmm.
we're all more thirsty for it. We're just now all able to apply it to business more effectively,
Right.
I think.
Yeah. No, it's true.
Would you agree,
Yeah, I would.
Gretchen? Linda? Yeah.
What do you see, Linda? I mean, you got a front row seat to
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Well, what I see a lot of is that we've always thought of coaching more in the sports world side of it. Even in the sports world, there's not one coach. There's a quarterback coach, a running back coach. In baseball, you've got a batting coach, a whatever coach,
Mhm.
base running, all of that sort of stuff. And in our lives, for some reason we thought we didn't need that coaching in our business world, in our personal lives, and I think, for me anyway, growing up in a generation where you didn't talk about your problems, that was not okay. You kept things in your home, and it was the same thing in the business world. You
Mhm.
didn't bring yourself to work. You were there to
Yeah.
do a
God
job
forbid,
and to
right?
perform a task. And so I think in doing so, what we've seen is the evolution. And I like that you talked about the whole person, because I think that's a lot of what we're seeing, and why there's more of this embracing is there's this recognition that maybe we don't have it all figured out. Maybe we don't really know what we're doing, and we could use some coaching along the way. So, self-awareness, we're talking like growth mindset is the big hot topic these days, in the world of work. And even looking at all of I've seen more personality assessment tools used in business over the last several years, that it's mind-boggling to me, because I look at those tests. I took them years ago, because that's what we did back then, is looking at some of that. But how are we using that? And that there is a hunger and a desire to actually understand the whole person. And I think COVID maybe brought some of that out. I say this oftentimes when
Yeah.
I'm speaking at events, is that somewhere along the line, because usually I'm speaking for government, and I said, we always say government did this, government did that. Government didn't do anything. It's the people who work in government. And somewhere along the line, even organizations have forgotten it's people who keep the doors open and the lights on. And if we're not being thoughtful and considerate and understanding that they do have a life outside of those four walls, then we're never going to be as successful as we could be. And so I think that there's been a level of acknowledgement and understanding, and now we're starting to see leaders embracing this idea that, hey, maybe we could use some help here. Maybe we've got it all wrong.
Yeah.
So
If we're going to transform, because I think COVID has taught us several lessons, it's been an invitation. I don't know that everybody, has been up for the lessons,
Agree.
but it certainly has been an invitation. And quite honestly, it's still with us because it wants us to pay
Yes.
attention. But people are coming to that place when they've had this pause. They're coming to that place that they want to have a purpose in
Yeah.
life, and we see it with generations in the workplace.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm looking at boomers and Gen X and Gen Y, and how do we create conditions
Yes.
to engage those who really want to work in a purpose full way, in an organization that's aligned with their values, who recognizes them for their individuality and the interconnectedness that these youngers operate with. Because we were all that
Yes.
self-made,
Right.
that
We did it
autonomy,
alone.
that
Yes.
independence. It's an
Yeah.
interdependence. So as an OD person, that piece is really, I mean, when I went to American University and I got my master's in OD, I had the great good fortune of having Edie and Charlie Seashore as my professors. I mean, they were part of the early years of organizational development, and their special gift, well, Edie was a pistol because she was on the front line with women in the workplace. I mean, she was on the front line at the Naval Academy when women were coming into the Naval Academy. And Charlie and Edie's gift is use of self. I mean, it's like, how do I show up? And each of us is a collection, to your point, Linda, of it's individuals. It's not the government. It's not the company. It's a collection of individuals. And when those individuals increase their awareness of themselves and how they show up and how they contribute and the impact that they have, or the wake that they throw, or how they communicate, or how they deal with conflict, or they don't deal with conflict, all of that awareness of myself and raising that up. So assessments, using the DISC or using the Myers-Briggs, having a leadership 360 to say, oh, I didn't realize I see myself like this. My colleagues, my direct reports see me this way. Like, so what do you want to do with that?
That's exactly.
And the gift.
Linda and I have done that for each other with that assessment. And it is amazing what those things will kick out if you're true to your response. And being aware and the self-awareness, Gretchen, I thrive in this. I think this is such interesting dialogue that, to Linda's point, is not always communicated out there, which is the purpose of this whole podcast and the book and embracing the humanity in business.
Yeah. Let's just
And I
get
think there's
comfortable
so
with
much,
that.
it's so
Yeah.
important
Totally agree.
as I watch my kids go deeper and deeper into the vortex of their phones, and sure, it's just the next generation of TV or whatever it is, there is a disconnect. My son was having a date with a girl on Sunday that he'd never even talked to.
Right.
It was all through social media. And I'm going,
Yeah.
where is the humanness in
Yeah.
this? You know,
Yeah.
it's crazy.
Yeah.
Was there date through social media, or did they actually get together and do
So they
something?
were getting together through social media, having never talked before. They were meeting at the town center in Reston. And I said, well, what have you talked about? What do you know about her? Nothing other than this
The social media
Snapchat
Hey,
interaction.
I met my husband of 22 years on a dating site. So
Yeah,
come on,
I mean,
you know,
it's
that was
fascinating to me, but I also think it's a level of humanity I want them to hear is important, because you did actually have the date.
the face to face,
Yes.
right? Yeah, I know it. But
Yeah,
there's
it's a
something
different
about
world.
those
That's
letters
right.
and those
Yeah.
texts and those
Yeah,
emails, and
yeah,
it's like, does it pale in
It's true.
reality?
No, that's
I hope it was the Barbie movie.
right.
Then
Exactly.
I would say your son's a keeper.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. I love that. No. Well, Gretchen, I can see why Scott has had this long-term relationship with you. We could definitely talk all day, and I hope you'll come back and join us on another
Yeah.
episode for
I
sure.
love talking with
Yeah,
the
no,
two
this
of
has
you.
been
Thank you.
wonderful. So we always like to end our podcast with 3 questions. And so my first question for you is, what is a common myth about your job or field of expertise?
What is a common myth? Well, I think that it requires a certain level of expertise, when really what it's about is just asking the question and
I
listening.
like that. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, because I do think you're absolutely right. People assume executive coach means you've done it all, seen it all, been everywhere, and not necessarily the truth. So, I
Yeah,
like
you're
that.
going to get reprimanded if you don't do it a certain
Yeah,
way, when it's really about holding the
I
space.
love
Yeah.
that. No, that's a
And
good
being
one.
trained on how to hold that space
Yeah,
does give it
Yeah.
validity, but that's really a good point,
yeah, I
Gretchen.
like
I think
that
it's
one
true.
for sure.
Mhm.
So, what is the most important lesson you've learned over your career?
To not take myself too
I
seriously.
like that.
When I was a teacher in, my early 20s, I had a poster, Raggedy Ann and Andy. And that was what it said. Don't take yourself too
Yeah,
seriously. And I still hold
I
that one.
like that one. That's a good one.
Yeah, it's good.
And my last question for you is, what's the one question you wish that we would have asked you, and how would you have answered it?
Boy, you really throw them at me. I'm the one who's accustomed to asking
I
the
know it's hard
questions.
when you're on the
So,
receiving end of that, right?
Take a minute, Gretchen. Take a minute. I'm sure a beautiful pearl of wisdom will be thrown at all of us.
ah, what's your favorite cocktail?
Ooh, I like that.
Okay.
What's your favorite cocktail?
Keep going. Keep going.
You want to
Yeah.
hear?
Well, Scott, you and I have had, it's bourbon with beef.
Okay.
Mhm.
All
Yeah,
right. All
right.
right.
So there's the combination. I make a mean
I
Manhattan,
love it.
and it's bourbon with beef.
I love
Love
it.
it. I
No,
love it.
that's great. Not taking yourself too seriously. I love it. So,
No,
that is
hardly,
wonderful.
Yeah.
hardly.
Thank you so much,
But
Gretchen,
Yes,
for
thank
being
you
here.
so
This
much
has
for
been
being here with
fantastic.
us, Scott. As always,
Such
I
an
enjoyed
You
our
guys are
time.
great hosts.
Oh,
It's been
Oh,
so
thank
much
you.
fun to talk
thank
with
you.
you.
We really
Well, we'll
enjoyed
do it
it.
again
We
this
will
fall. We're going to have
definitely do
another
it.
round. Got another
Yes.
series
Got
coming
another
out.
series.
Excellent.
Yeah, we can't wait. Have a whole new line of guests and some repeat guests, and we can't wait to be back. So thank you so much, and we
Thank
wish
you.
everyone well today. We hope you enjoyed this episode of An Unconventional Guide to Success. If you want to learn more about Gretchen Krampf, you can follow her on LinkedIn. Her profile is in the show notes. An Unconventional Guide to Success is an inspirational, motivated series hosted by Scott Montgomery and Linda Misegadis, recorded on Riverside.fm. Music, editing, and production by Logan Misegadis. Check out Scott Montgomery's new book, How Did You Get Here, and all the helpful related materials at www.howdidyougethere.com. Thank you for joining us on our journey. If you would like to reach out to us, our contact information is in the show notes.